Here's what I have to say about Jared. Look, I'm gonna tell you guys the truth about him.
Let us know it.
He is gonna graduate with an MFA this May from. Did I say he's gonna graduate with a BS in
BS and BS, man.
from San Francisco State University. He's an ESL teacher. His left eye was savagely torn out by jackals in the Great Jackal-Human War of 2046, only to be replaced by a sentient, kind of like those, those Mike's Hard Lemonade ads where there's a little creature. Right. His eyeball is like that, and it says uncouth things at inopportune times. So it's a whole mess. Anyways, please welcome Jared Roehrig. Woo!
Hey, thank you for that name. I'm so sleepy today. Just take a sleep right up here. Good evening. So I'm just going to read some of my thesis. This is called The Dream Diary of Ho Chi Minh. I don't know, you guys have probably heard some jazz from this occasionally. It's kind of like a prose poem collection, but there's some narrative pieces in there as well. And I'll start with the beginning part. Y'all can hear me all right, huh? Yeah, okay. Club du Faubourg. So this is when Ho Chi Minh was living in Paris in 1917 to 1923, and there's supposed to be he starts keeping a dream diary for reasons which may or may not be explained. So this is the beginning. Club du Faubourg, 1917. All beasts can be conquered, the large and the small. The turtles as much as the snails and birds. Look at a diagram of a snail's hypersensitive organs and the concentric rings of his shell. The spleen, drawn in yellow, allows this particular creature to communicate over the infinite trenches of distance. Each creature born to a field has layers that encircle the body in rings of paint. The doctor demonstrates animal magnetism on the chalkboard. He draws an animal and then encircles it with one white ring after another. He draws and speaks, commanding the audience to his voice. You try and follow this voice, this dreary gas-lit voice that seems to have reached you from the previous century. You appreciate the pictures he provides, since the words must travel from the stage all the way to the back of the auditorium, where you sit with your hat in your hand and the sweat-gathering brim. To make matters worse, the echo in the auditorium transforms everything the doctor says into a beast with gauzy edges, and you remember how this beast had the gall to follow you once into the bathrooms when so much straining to listen exhausted you. Despite this effect, the animal picture allows you to concentrate on what is being said. You trace each vibrating circle with fidelity, and your eyes magnify, as they do, the smallest details. At first, you notice the remnants of chalk that cling to specific points in the circles, then the white thumbprints of the doctor himself, who, in creating the circles, has unknowingly revealed his identity as a ghostly pattern of misshapen swirls. This last part is not where I lost myself, but where I made a little jump in my head. Since coming to Paris, this has been happening more frequently. I might be at a meeting of socialists, waiting for someone to whisper something about the colonies, or writing a letter to someone who is very far away, and suddenly I am shoveling snow in London again. The other day I swept up the floor at 6 Villa des Gobelins, and out of the bristles against the wood came my father's voice. It was just like the way he sounded in Saigon, where I last left him in that rat's nest by the canal. He sat upright to greet me and warned me of hypnotism. I was disgusted by where he lived, by the way the shack threatened to heap over into the canal, by the rotting palm roof held together by mud, and the briny smell of roasting cuttlefish that darkened the air. I was no less disgusted by his movements. His skin crackled audibly, sheathing out where it should not, hanging loose as if it would melt away in the heat. I thought of the burned-out tips of incense, swept away by diligent hands at night and relit at dawn. It appeared that he was shedding, that he wore his skin like an unwanted visitor who refused to leave. Black spots blossomed along the ridges of his cheekbones, as if he'd let a miniature keg of gunpowder explode in his face. His toes had fused together, and his tongue dangled limp in his watery mouth, like a floating abscess. His fingertips were white. Before him lay a small mound of salt covered by a rag. He uncovered the pile and dipped his finger to the pile, and then to his tongue and back again. By then the transformation was evident in his body. But I thought this condition was partly my fault. Perhaps he had chosen this word arbitrarily, hypnotism, as a scapegoat to his suffering and an alleviation to my guilt. I had not seen him for a long time, but I stayed long enough to observe his routine. He would twitch and prescribe the salt to a few who came around and who twitched even more, then go pull out some tawny vegetables growing on the side of the canal and cook them in the canal water. This place was not far from the Dragon House, the place where the ships docked, where French ships unmoored their goods and paid children to dive into the canal and clean the bottoms of the hulls. A place for the world to exchange its diseases, its ideas, its vices, but also its hope. The height of the dry season was on everyone's tongue. "I'm going to leave the country to see the world, Father," I said. "Ha!" he laughed. "When your country is lost, how can you have a home?" He was right. I didn't have a home. I didn't even have a name. The first half of my life had been erased. My family scattered, imprisoned, or blacklisted. There was nowhere left to go. But I knew I could not continue without seeing how they had done it. How the ones from the West had turned the home of 20 million people into a prison. My father called it hypnotism, and he often mentioned opium and alcohol in this respect, but he did not tell me what they had done to him exactly. What they had done to him as punishment for killing a landlord, for being a father to agitators and a friend of troublemakers. I looked and I imagined how a man could go from respected mandarin to something that resembled a common frog. This was 1909. The desperation to find what had been erased and what had been changed became my obsession. I looked for my home wherever I went, asked about my family members to strangers I met in each town. Sitting before my father in his rat's nest, I looked for my home in the space where his teeth used to hang. I looked for it in the fingers that had taught me Chinese characters and now shook all by themselves, like slender cockroach wings ready to take flight. In that space of disgusting transformation, I could find the strength to imagine the next stage, and there was nowhere else to look. "I have to leave in order to find the country, Father." And I began to tell him why and for whom, but he laughed and became disinterested, returning to his mound of salt. Perhaps he suspected my foolishness, the insanity embedded in hope. I felt truly alone then. A stranger entered the shack and lay down in the corner and wet himself. My father left the shack to go pick more vegetables. I followed him out under the blazing sun, and for a moment I closed my eyes and saw a red banner flickering behind my eyelids. When I opened my eyes again, my father was struggling down the canal bank, singing a song. He had already forgotten me, and I was gone before he returned. I cannot tell you why this is happening, this getting lost in things, or if this is simply what they refer to as nostalgia. In any case, something came over me. In the middle of the doctor's lecture on animal magnetism and the new century, I lost myself. I attacked the doctor with everything I had, which was not much, but I was on my feet. I stood up in that crowded room and got on my feet and spoke. I stuttered and I stood up. My voice cracked in half. I used words that have never passed before my lips, words that hadn't been invented yet, half Vietnamese, half French utterances that appeared suddenly in a burning dictionary at the end of my throat. My hands were shaking as if they were not my own. I waited for someone to tell me to be sensible, to kindly not return to the lecture series. I sat down. This is my fate, I assumed, fumbling the half-moon buttons of my coat, preparing myself for the humiliating exit as best I could. Then the thought of returning home to my sad hotel at the end of a windy cul-de-sac where the wind deposited small church pamphlets and thin cigar stubs into the gutter. I had been possessed by someone other than myself. I had broken a basic principle of respectful silence. I would learn nothing in this new place. And then it came. There was a generous applause. Imagine, someone said, the mute of Montmartre speaks. The clamor danced in my ears like seeds threatening to burst. Something released itself inside, rolled around in the pit of my belly, and yanked itself free. A hand came to me. I clasped it in my own and shook it. So I'll just read some other poem lines. This is what makes me wild. The eyes carried fire through them. Swinging on grandmother's shoulders, her tales of heroism, the emperor escaped into hills. I thought every cove hid his ghost. At night, while my family snored in hammocks as the many-lunged house creature, I went out and searched the black chain for his crown. Dilating through the dark of cockroach wings, I cut the tops off shale tinting the horizon, plummeting the gaze into the bodies of distant mountain. If held long enough, you could make animal shapes lose direction, smolder up. With diligence, a snake's head burst into flames. A rabbit head held at the right angle could bury himself into lightning at the feet of the emperor's hiding place. At his home in the suburbs, Leopoldes takes me into his study and shows me his bird skeletons. He has an entire room of them. Waxwings on pedestals and sparrows clustered in a humidor. Glass boxes with yellow bright bones rubbed clean of feather. The work rag still warm in the corner. One or two with the plumage intact. A tuft of black or silk red stuck to a ribbon of skull and beak. They loom gloss-eyed in a frozen circle around me. I take a step backwards. Some of them hang invisible from the many-ceilinged fish threads. And when he opens the window and lets in a breeze, the birds take the thought of flight in their bones, swinging in a state of two worlds. One of escape and one of confinement. Shall we cut them down? Asks Poldes. But we just stand there and watch, and I scan the room for a scissor wound. I finish my tea and Poldes stays frozen. Dregs gather at the bottom and form a tadpole. Offers me a new cup. I hand him the first drink. No, he says, they are for your eyes, and for your eyes, and for your eyes, and for your eyes alone.
Mark, free copy?
this one.
Mark, do you copy?
Postcards from the Amarella Touche Treville. In the way the steamliner names me, and steel bolts groan in their hold, I learned there is nothing to hoist but bags of coal from winch locks. The black skein bags which spill and shatter toes, the purple-bottomed feet of hell from their bunks, stuck with toothpicks and winnings of obsolete coins. Shillings of slaughtered places write letters to lovers on invented skin. Tell them not to curse, even when the matting scratches our elbows away. There is a village and the women of Algiers and the smell of candle selling in Prague on their lips. And later, when my singing teacher goes to vomit, a little splatter on the stair. In the dinner cast off, I recognize the notes of a page you could say is a holy book of brotherhood. Once his face was a horn he sang out with his head curled in the sun. Alright, I think I'll do it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.